The courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations, the atmosphere dense with unease as the judge adjusted his glasses and prepared to deliver his decision. At the back of the packed room, a woman named Naomi Sinclair sat quietly, her sharp gaze fixed on the proceedings. She wasn't just a casual observer. She had a purpose. Every detail of this case had drawn her in, and what she had witnessed so far was deeply unsettling. The entire trial had been a farce, tilted blatantly in favor of the two officers accused of using excessive force. Naomi had seen this pattern before. Key evidence that contradicted the officers' statements had been brushed aside. Witnesses whose testimonies could have changed everything had been discredited or ignored. The prosecutor, sensing the court's bias, treaded carefully, hesitant to push too hard against the system protecting its own. The outcome seemed inevitable. But Naomi wasn't here just to watch injustice unfold. She was here to disrupt it. As the judge droned on, she became aware of a uniformed officer standing by the exit, his eyes flickering toward her more often than necessary. At first, she dismissed it, assuming he was just scanning the crowd. But his gaze lingered, his expression shifting from casual observation to something more deliberate. Then, with a firm nod to himself, he started walking toward her. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me," he said in a low, authoritative tone. Naomi met his gaze evenly. "Excuse me? This courtroom is restricted to authorized personnel," he continued, his voice steady but forceful. A few heads turned at the exchange. Naomi remained composed. "This is a public hearing," she said simply. "I have every right to be here." The officer's jaw tightened. "I need you to step outside now." A murmur swept through the spectators. Why her? Why now? The judge finally glanced up, his irritation clear. "What's the issue, officer?" "She isn't permitted to be here, Your Honor," the officer stated, his voice firm but quick, as if hoping to resolve the situation before too much attention was drawn. The judge's eyes flicked toward Naomi, scrutinizing her. "If security says she needs to leave, then she needs to leave." Naomi exhaled slowly, centering herself. She knew exactly what was happening. A woman sitting quietly, watching, refusing to shrink. Someone like her made them uncomfortable. They assumed she was powerless. Just another face in the crowd. They had no idea who she was. No idea of the influence she carried. No idea that today, they would not be dictating how this played out. With a composed expression, she reached into her bag, her fingers moving quickly as she tapped out a brief message on her phone. Then, she set it down and folded her hands in her lap, waiting. The officer, growing impatient, reached toward her arm. "Ma'am, I won't ask again." Naomi lifted her chin. "You should check your radio." His brow furrowed. Then, as if on cue, his radio crackled. "Unit 7, stand down immediately," a crisp voice ordered. The officer blinked. "Say again." "Unit 7, do not remove Miss Sinclair from the courtroom. Escort her with full courtesy if she chooses to leave. This is a direct order." Silence fell over the room. The judge's expression shifted from smug confidence to stark confusion. The prosecutor mid-sentence suddenly stopped. The officer, who had just been moments away from forcibly removing Naomi, stiffened in shock. "Oh, who is this?" he stammered. "This is the Executive Office of National Affairs," the voice continued. "Miss Sinclair has full authorization to remain where she is. Any action taken against her will be considered a direct violation of federal jurisdiction. A senior official is en route." The air in the room changed instantly. Murmurs turned into a full-blown wave of whispers. Naomi's name spread through the crowd like wildfire. The judge swallowed hard, looking between the officer and Naomi, realization dawning. The officer, clearly rattled, took a hesitant step back. Naomi finally stood, smoothing her coat. Her voice was calm but firm. "I believe that settles the matter." The officer stumbled over his words, stepping back as his face flushed red with embarrassment. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom, growing louder with each passing second as spectators exchanged puzzled glances. The judge, shifting in his seat, adjusted his glasses as if searching for a way to regain control. His once commanding presence now wavered, And for the first time since the trial began, he seemed unsure of how to proceed. And then the door swung open. A tall man in a sharp navy suit strode inside, his steps precise and unhurried. The emblem pinned to his lapel, a golden insignia that marked him as a senior federal official, caught the harsh courtroom lights, instantly silencing the room. All eyes turned toward him as he moved with quiet authority. He stopped beside Naomi Sinclair, offering a slight nod of acknowledgement before shifting his gaze to the judge. His voice, calm but firm, carried through the courtroom with undeniable weight. "Miss Sinclair is a senior government representative," he stated. "She's here on official business. I assume that won't be an issue." The judge, who only moments ago had been so eager to dismiss her, now looked like a man desperate to melt into his chair. He opened his mouth as if searching for an excuse, but Naomi's steady gaze, along with the presence of the federal official, held him in place. The power dynamic in the room had shifted, and he knew it. "Oh, of course not," the judge stammered, clearing his throat. The official didn't so much as blink. "Good," he said smoothly, "because from what I've observed, this trial is in need of immediate federal oversight." The words sent a shockwave through the room. The officer's attorney stiffened, his grip tightening on his briefcase. It was clear that whatever game they thought they were playing had just changed drastically and not in their favor. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time since the trial began, the two officers at the defense table no longer looked confident. Their once smug expressions had been replaced by something else entirely. Fear. And Naomi? She merely crossed her legs, leaned back in her chair, and smiled. Because the reckoning had finally begun. The judge, visibly rattled, shifted his gaze toward the defendants. Their lawyer fumbled through his notes, his previous confidence now nowhere to be found. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, emboldened by the sudden presence of federal authority, straightened his shoulders, his posture filled with new determination. The energy in the room had transformed. What had once been a scripted performance designed to protect those in power had now turned into something much bigger. A trial that would no longer be controlled by those who had expected to walk away unscathed. Naomi felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about one case. It was about ensuring that cases like this could never be quietly swept away again. She met the judge's uncertain gaze and tilted her head slightly. "Shall we proceed, Your Honor?" Her voice was measured, polite even, but there was an unmistakable authority behind it, one that made the judge shift in his chair. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before giving a stiff nod. "Proceed." And just like that, the real battle for justice had begun. Outside, a growing crowd of reporters gathered on the courthouse steps, their cameras and microphones capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Word of what had just transpired inside the courtroom had spread like wildfire. The entire city, perhaps even the entire nation, was watching. Back inside, Naomi sat calmly as the prosecutor took his newfound confidence and used it to reintroduce the evidence that had been previously ignored. The video footage was replayed, this time with no convenient glances away. Witnesses, who had once hesitated out of fear, now spoke clearly and with conviction, knowing that their words would finally hold weight. The defense attorney squirmed, sensing that the usual tactics of deflection and manipulation would not work today. The officers who had once sat with casual arrogance now exchanged nervous glances, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Justice, long denied, was now in motion, unstoppable, undeniable, and irreversible. This trial was no longer just about one case. It had become something much larger, a statement, a warning, a turning point in a system that had protected the wrong people for far too long. And as the doors of the courtroom remained open for all to witness, Naomi Sinclair knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning.